That's that's not the whole picture, Greg. Jessica Tarlov's voice cracked for a fraction of a second, a tiny fracture in the icy armor of her confidence. On the massive studio screen behind her, a simple, brutal chart glowed, and across the table, her co-host just stared, letting the silence do the work. The numbers she had so arrogantly presented as gospel were dissolving into dust under the harsh lights of live television. And she knew, in that horrifying moment, that President Trump's team had just beaten her at her own game. The air in the Fox News studio crackled with a familiar, manufactured tension. It was the controlled chaos that preceded every broadcast of the five, a place where political combat was both a sport and a science. But today, the energy felt different. It was sharper, more predatory, and it was all emanating from Jessica Tarlov. She sat at the curved table, a portrait of smug certainty. Her notes were arranged in a precise, almost surgical stack before her. They weren't just notes, they were ammunition. For a week, she had been cultivating a source, a supposed disgruntled analyst within the Treasury Department, who had fed her what she believed was pure gold. An early draft of an internal analysis on President Donald Trump's new signature economic policy, the American Heartland Revitalization Act. The policy itself was classic Trump, a sweeping, ambitious plan to deregulate key agricultural and manufacturing sectors, coupled with targeted tax incentives to bring factories back to the Rust Belt. It was bold, patriotic, and popular with his base. Tarlov, however, saw it as a house of cards, and her leaked documents were the wrecking ball she intended to use. As the show's opening theme faded and the cameras went live, she could barely contain her glee. She let her co-hosts banter for a few moments, a shark circling in the water, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The segment began, and the moderator turned to her. Jessica, the president is calling this the most significant pro-worker legislation in a generation. What are you hearing? This was her moment. Well, Janine, she began, her voice dripping with condescending authority. I'm hearing something very different from what the White House is selling. In fact, I have in my possession internal Treasury projections that paint a picture not of revitalization, but of ruin. She picked up the top sheet from her stack, holding it as if it were a sacred text. According to this document, the projected Laffer curve inversion under Section 2, subsection C of the Act, will create a net tax revenue shortfall of over $80 billion in the first fiscal year alone. The administration is touting a 1.5% GDP growth, but their own internal models, the ones they don't want you to see, show a potential contraction of 0.5% when you factor in the projected supply chain disruptions. It was a masterclass in obfuscation. She wove a tapestry of complex jargon, Laffer curve inversion, fiscal year basis points, logarithmic regression models, all designed to sound impressive and irrefutable. She was an expert speaking truth to power, the brave intellectual exposing the lies of a populist administration. She could feel the momentum building. She was in complete control. Across the country, in a quiet, focused office in Washington, D.C., the president's rapid response team was watching. They weren't panicked. They were prepared. For 2 days, they had been tracking the whispers of a major scoop Tarlov was planning. They knew her methods, her arrogance, and her reliance on pre-planned attacks. They had anticipated this exact line of assault. The team's director, a young, sharp-witted strategist, typed a simple instruction into a secure chat. She took the bait. Greg, you're up. Feed is live. Back in the New York studio, Greg Goodfeld, known for his sharp humor and populist instincts, subtly glanced at the tablet embedded in his desk. A new window had opened, pushed directly from the response team. It contained no complex analysis, no counter arguments. It was just a link to a public facing page on the US Treasury Department's own website, and a single, beautifully simple chart. On air, Tarlov was reaching the crescendo of her attack. So, when the president stands at a podium and promises a new dawn for American manufacturing, she said, her voice filled with theatrical indignation, he is either unaware of what his own experts are telling him, or he is willfully deceiving the American people. There is no third option. She leaned back, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She had laid the trap. She had delivered the killing blow. The floor was hers. But then, the unexpected happened. That's a very interesting theory, Jessica, Greg said, his tone casual, almost conversational. It cut through her self-important pronouncements like a knife. You've got a lot of numbers there, a lot of big words. But I'm a simple guy. I like pictures. Tarlov's smirk tightened. I'm sorry, Greg. Is this going to be a joke? Because this is a serious economic issue. Deadly serious, Greg replied, his eyes locking onto hers. So serious, in fact, that I think we should look at the real numbers, not from a piece of paper that, for all we know, you could have written yourself this morning. Let's look at what the Treasury Department is telling the American public right now on their official website. He looked toward the control room. Guys, can we put that up on the screen? Suddenly, the massive screen behind the panel, which had been showing the show's logo, flickered to life. It wasn't a complex spreadsheet. It was a simple, clean bar chart. The title was stark. Projected first-year job growth under AHRA. Official Treasury data. The chart showed 3 bars. The first, labeled baseline, no action, was low. The second, labeled CBO projection, was moderately higher. The third, labeled US Treasury official projection, soared above the others, indicating the creation of nearly 1.2 million new jobs. Below it, in clear, bold text, was the source. Source: US Department of the Treasury, Public Data Release, June 26, 2025. The date was yesterday's. The camera zoomed in on the chart, holding the shot for a full 5 seconds. It was a digital guillotine. When the camera cut back to the panel, the atmosphere had been shattered. Tarlov was staring at the screen, her face pale. The smug confidence had vanished, replaced by a deer in the headlights panic. Her entire, meticulously constructed argument, built on the foundation of secret documents, had just been demolished by a publicly available JPEG. That's not the whole picture, Greg, she stammered, the first crack in her composure. Greg didn't say a word. He just held his gaze, letting her flail. That's a simplistic chart for public consumption, she insisted, her voice rising in pitch. It doesn't account for the multivariate risk factors. It ignores the basis point differentials I was just citing. So the Treasury is lying to the public? Greg asked, his voice calm and even. The official numbers are fake, but the secret paper you have is real? Is that what you're saying? The question hung in the air, a devastatingly simple trap. She couldn't say yes without sounding like a conspiracy theorist. She couldn't say no without admitting her entire segment was a lie. She was paralyzed. Her script, her pre-written attack lines, her complex jargon, it was all useless. She had prepared for a debate on her terms, within the fictional world created by her source. She had no defense against a simple, verifiable fact. What I'm saying, she began, shuffling her papers, her eyes darting around, refusing to meet the camera, is that the issue is far more complex than a simple bar chart can convey. But the retreat was obvious to everyone watching. The spell was broken. Her authority had evaporated. She wasn't an intellectual powerhouse. She was a partisan who had been caught reading from a faulty script. The segment ended in a painfully awkward silence, the hosts quickly throwing to a commercial break. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. The hashtag #teleprompter trap trended nationally. The image of the simple chart next to Tarlov's panicked face became an instant meme. Later that evening, President Donald Trump sat in the Oval Office, a slight smile on his face as he watched the clip on a tablet. He didn't need to rage or gloat. His team had executed the plan to perfection. They had used his opponent's arrogance against her, laying a trap she was too smug to see. He picked up his phone, opened his Truth Social app, and typed a short, powerful message. He attached the viral clip of the on-air implosion. Truth is simple. Lies are complicated. Great job by Greg Gutfeld exposing the fake news talking points. They aren't interested in the facts. They only want to tear down our great American comeback. Sad. He hit truth. The post exploded online. He had won. It wasn't just a victory in the daily news cycle. It was a strategic masterstroke. He had heroically defended his policy not by engaging in a messy, complicated debate, but by trusting in the power of a single, clear fact to expose the malice and deceit of his opponents. He had proven that for all their complex narratives and condescending jargon, they were no match for the simple, unshakable truth. What do you think is more damaging to a public figure's credibility? Being caught in a complex lie, or being unable to defend their position without a script? Let us know your thoughts below. And be sure to subscribe for more stories of high-stakes political battles.